4 years ago, one of my favorite tabletop games came out on the PC, and I didn't quite know just how awesome it would be until I got it a while later. Today, I want to talk about that game. Welcome back to Society Case Files. My name is Robert, and today we're going to be talking about the Necromunda Underhive Wars video game. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. But otherwise, we're going to dive right in. When I actually got into Warhammer pretty much a year ago, as far as the tabletop version goes, I went because of Necromunda. I planned on buying Necromunda models and going that route because it just seemed to me that buying a gang would be a lot cheaper than trying to get a whole army for 40k or Age of Sigmar. Little did I know that I would become enamored with tons of the products and end up spending loads and loads and loads of money. But aside from that probably financially disastrous decision, I have to say that Necromunda still holds a place in my heart. I mean, I love the game a lot. I have the Ash Wastes, I've got Hive Secundus, I've got tons of extra models. I'm all in on Necromunda. I just haven't talked about it as much on the channel yet. But anyway, we're not here to talk about all that tabletop foolishness. I could do that all day. No, what I want to talk about is the video game, which did not disappoint. Necromunda Underhive Wars is awesome. It's an upgraded version, at least in my opinion, before I go on there, of the Mordheim game that they came out with. And that's honestly the same game at its heart too. It's gangs in the old world as opposed to in the 40k universe. But this one just has great graphics still to this day and a pretty interesting campaign, a neat skirmish mode that you can play by yourself, and multiplayer. They really did the most when they put it out as far as the aesthetic is concerned. Nailed it. The voice acting, nailed it. The general gameplay, a little wonky, but still fun. They added a couple of gangs post-launch, but not all of them are in the game. You can't play the Dalok, for example. But the available choices are expansive, and you can do quite a bit of customization with each individual member of the gang, when you create one, that is. So like when you go to play the game in skirmish mode or multiplayer or whatever, you can actually build your own gang. You can choose what class they are, how they look. You can upgrade their weapons. They level up. When you buy them, when you use your finances in the game to purchase them, they have levels that you can see. So you can pick a Juve all the way up to a leader. It's actually pretty cool. I think they did a good job of really understanding the environment that they were getting into and presenting it in a really just gorgeous way. To be frank, I think the graphics are still really, really good. There's 2 points I want to address about the game besides my waxing about how much I love it and how I think it's pretty much the best thing ever, because that's not entirely true. I know that my glowing praise at the beginning of this probably says otherwise, but I recognize that the mixed reviews might actually be fair. But before we get into some of the concerns that I've read about, I want to talk about the campaign and what I don't like about it. The premise of the campaign is that someone has discovered some Archaea tech and all of the gangs want to get it. They want their hands on it. It makes sense. So the Eschers have gone way outside of their normal territory to meet and discuss this. In the process of doing so, they run afoul the other gangs, the Goliaths and so on. Now, the trick is you start out playing the Eschers, and they're sort of your tutorial level, and then you fight some of the other gangs, and you do a whole bunch of stuff. And then it switches so that you suddenly are having to play as the Goliaths. And that's where it sort of lost me, because I would have rather just played as one of the gangs all the way through, particularly since you actually fight the characters that you were just playing as the other gangs. And yeah, I don't really dig on that. I hate it when other games do it. I really didn't like it here. It was very frustrating and sad because the story was cool. And again, the voice acting is great. The cutscenes are amazing. I think that if you could take them all out and make a movie out of it, then that'd be a great little Necromunda feature. But considering how they present the story, I get it. It sort of has a novel feel in that regard, because first you're following these people, and then to tell more of the story, you switch over to this head hop. And in that regard, okay, I can listen to that argument. But unfortunately for me, it kind of ruins the narrative, because again, I want to get attached to a set of characters that I'm playing. I'm not just reading this book, but it would kind of suck in a book too if you were reading and suddenly the main characters that you were way into at the beginning are just getting, blasted by the next set of characters that you're following? And what if you don't like those new characters as much as the previous ones? Like, what if they're just not enjoyable people? Then as a creator, as a writer, or as the people who are making the game, you kind of find yourself in a position where you've lost the audience. Now, main characters generally don't get completely executed in this, so it's not like you're technically losing them, and it does hop back to your gangs later on, just like a novel would. So it's really up to your tolerance for how much you care about characters and story. As far as gameplay is concerned, it's still fun regardless, and it's a Necromunda adventure, and that might be just enough, and it should be, but it wasn't for me, and I'm sad about that. Let's talk about the skirmish modes, the different ways to play the game. Not necessarily the army building, because that's super simple at the beginning, but when you actually get into the game, and I've got some footage, I'm not going to show it all because it takes forever, and that leads me to one of the complaints that I've read. Matches take a long time, and you do watch the AI take their turn as they do absolutely ridiculous actions. For example, I watched one guy jump off of a ramp, and then he took 2 steps, and then he jumped back up onto the ramp at a different point, which technically speaking wasted action points for absolutely no reason. Then he jumped over to the lip of this weird container, and then he jumped back over at a different point, wasting even more action points, and then knelt behind some stuff without really approaching an objective or even taking an action against another character. So people do complain about the AI being stupid, and sometimes they are. Sometimes they actually did some clever things. I have to give them some credit. They took a shot and then ran out of range, which was kind of nice, and they actually got far enough away to where I couldn't get them for 2 rounds. Okay, that's not too bad. They also complained that these take too long, and I will attest that when 3 gangs were on a map, and I had 4 characters, and each of them did too, just watching them take their turns alone was a lengthy proposition. They are slow, especially when they start doing stupid stuff like jumping around over and over again or running in circles. And occasionally they would just be done with their turn, but their character be running in place. Like either he's against a barrel or he literally had no more move points, but the game hadn't registered that yet. So he's just running. That kind of wonkiness plagues this game. So you kind of got to give it a pass in that regard. And that's another thing that reviewers have said. They'd recommend it if you can excuse the rougher edges that the developers did not bother to clean up. In fact, one person suggested that as a Warhammer or Necromunda fan, you probably are going to get into it regardless and love it because you are starved for Necromunda content, I guess. But if you're not a fan of those things, then you may find yourself more frustrated than entertained. And that's a fair assessment, absolutely fair, because let's be honest, if you see AI doing stupid stuff, it breaks immersion. I mean, they're supposed to be simulating some sense of self-preservation while trying to achieve the same objectives that you are in the game. And if they're not, then it just is comedy. It's a clown show. And unfortunately, Necromunda does suffer from that to some extent. Will you experience that as much in the campaign? Not really as badly. But during skirmish, when there's like multiple objectives, for example, in the one that I recorded here, you've got to grab these barrels and get them to a certain point. You've got to loot crates and that sort of thing. The AI had plenty of opportunities to do those things and didn't. Now, they were running around with the barrels, splashing chemicals all over themselves, like it didn't matter. But they weren't doing the objectives the way that a person would have, or even close to. Now, do I expect perfection? Absolutely not. Most games have crappy AI in some regard or another, especially these kind of games that are not remotely AAA. This game was more a labor of love, and I do believe that they cared about the game. I just don't know that they had the resources or the time to develop out all of the bugs and the, again, rough edges. So if you can excuse those things, and if you love Necromunda, and if you really enjoy the aesthetic of what they've built here, then I think that you'd really enjoy the game all around. I like the movement a lot. I like that you aren't just like right-clicking or left-clicking to tell them where to go, but it's kind of got that third-person action feel where you can move it around and then aim at people. And you still have quite a few statistics. It tells whether or not you're going to hit, how much damage you're going to do, what it's going to take. It feels pretty tactical, but at the same time, it's fairly simple. Some people have said that it's a little bit more complicated than it should be. I'm not sure that's true. unless maybe I just am terrible and have missed some of the more complicated elements of the game. But if that's the case, I still had a lot of fun, so I can't really complain about it. But that's just my 2 cents on a game that is effectively 4 years old now, and your mileage may vary greatly. But that's all I have to say about Necromunda today. If you've tried this game, let me know. What do you think of it? Have you tried something like it? Is there another Necromunda game I don't know about? Did you love Mordheim? Drop a comment and let's talk about it. Otherwise, this is Robert with Society Case Files, signing off.